Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. On tonight's programme, I have as my guest our usual lineup of Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group. Welcome back, Chris.
Evening, Gordon.
And also sitting with me this evening via our new link is Day Tucker, our Rural Affairs correspondent. Welcome back to you, Day, as well.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Okay, so I'm going to press on as usual with the coronavirus update. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 446,278 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres. Now, of these, 426,744 were confirmed negative. 19,534 were positive. There are 77 new confirmed cases of COVID-19, and there are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. This will be an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 249 were in hospital last night, 2 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection remains at 2,492. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 41,403 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 6 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Don't forget this evening, if you're watching the programme, that you can now take part via Twitter, so feel free to join in at any point during the rest of the programme. Now to our first story this evening, and that is that the lockdown in Scotland is to remain in Phase 3 for now. Scotland will remain in Phase 3 of the route map out of lockdown because COVID-19 remains a significant threat to public health, the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said. In a statement to the Scottish Parliament, the First Minister announced an earlier date for the reopening of gyms, swimming pools, indoor sports courts, including dance studios. Subject to guidance, such facilities will now be able to reopen from the 31st of August rather than the 14th of September. From the 24th of August, organised outdoor contact sports, some outdoor live events, driving lessons, child contact centres, face-to-face advice services, bingo halls, amusement arcades and casinos, snooker and pool halls, indoor bowling and both static and travelling fun fairs can reopen, subject to strict adherence to guidance and appropriate safety measures such as physical distancing. The First Minister also announced new measures to control the spread of coronavirus following outbreaks across the country. She said that in reports of recent clusters, indoor hospitality settings such as bars and restaurants and social events and gatherings in people's homes have stood out as major risk factors. Under new legislation, local authorities will be given the power to act in respect of individual premises that are breaching guidelines and risking transmission of the virus. In addition, the Scottish Government intends to give the police new powers to break up and disperse large indoor gatherings. Regulations will be laid next week with the intention that they come into force on Friday the 28th of August. Day, let me come to you first for your reaction. So this is, again, a little bit of good news that most of the restrictions are being lifted, but with a heavy emphasis, it seems, on continuing to monitor these indoor events and to make sure that large gatherings are not taking place and giving the police extra powers. Do you feel that the government is being proportionate in its response to things at the moment, Dave?
Yes, I do. I tend to think it's a little bit overdue because I think the police could have done with powers a little bit earlier. Whether that would have made a huge amount of difference, I don't know. But certainly, police having powers to stop, irregular parties and get-togethers is a good step forward.
Okay, Dave, thank you for that. Chris, if I could come to you on this as well. They're obviously naming a lot of different events which can now take place, including outdoor events, large gatherings. I'm thinking perhaps we're talking about things like rock concerts and open-air festivals, but with social distancing. So obviously the organisers of these events are going to have to go to some lengths to make sure that these things happen, yeah?
Yeah. Last time I was at a rock concert, it was £3.50 to go and see Queen at the Greens Playhouse.
Chris, I was at that concert as well, believe it or not.
I'm not getting an indication as to where I'm coming from. No, I mean, it's good that things are starting to open up. Again, with the caveat that we're staying in phase 3 and we're not quite ready to go into phase 4. And I'm actually quite pleased that we are taking the slowly catch a monkey approach. I don't want to go too hard and too fast on it. I understand the needs of business, obviously, from a trade union point of view. But at the end of the day, you know, in order to learn how to live with this virus, because that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to learn to live with it. Then, you know, we need time to adapt. So I think it's, ideal situation to move the country forward.
Excellent. Well, also, I mean, I noticed, Chris, from the list of various activities which are now permitted, we've also got things like Citizens Advice Service being able to operate again. How important, Day, do you think it is for people to be able to access services like this now?
Well, I think it is extremely important, particularly for those who don't have access to the internet. I've no doubt probably there's some way of contacting citizens' advice on the internet. Not everybody, as I say, has got access to it.
Yeah.
So, you know, the more ways that we can safely get that sort of communication going, the better.
Okay. Chris, it also seems that we've got bingo halls, amusement arcades and casinos starting up. How important are they, though, to the Scottish economy? I remember Gordon Brown sort of deregulating that industry many years ago. But do you think that being able to gamble again is a wonderful freedom, or is that pushing it a little bit?
Well, I think most of the viewers will probably remember the fact that I am very anti-gambling. I just don't believe in the whole ethos of it. So perhaps you're asking the wrong person. I was actually slightly interested at the point Patrick Harvey made this afternoon in FMQs with regards to the Glasgow Live establishment, such as Govan Hill Baths and city libraries and stuff like that. More often than not, these places are the first port of contact for people who can't afford Wi-Fi. You know, and that is where they will go to get Wi-Fi signal in order to access such service, the likes of Citizens Advice and stuff like that. So, I would like to see money going in to support these efforts. But, you know, the First Minister did point out the fact that, the opposition parties need to argue for the fact that Scotland needs the additional powers on fiscal autonomy and on borrowing in order for us to actually support these groups.
Okay, Chris, listen, thank you for that. Moving on to a second story now, going to America this time, and it's emerged today that Steve Bannon has now been charged with fraud. The former Trump campaign manager, Steve Bannon, was arrested on Thursday for his alleged role in skimming donations from We Build the Wall, an online fundraising campaign for the US president's controversial border wall with Mexico, officials in New York said. Using a non-profit organisation that he controlled, Bannon received over $1 million from We Build the Wall, at least some of which Bannon used to cover hundreds of thousands of dollars in his personal expenses, federal prosecutors in Manhattan said. 3 other men, Brian Kolfage, Andrew Badolato and Timothy Shea, were also arrested in this alleged scheme to defraud the non-profit, which authorities said raised more than $25 million. The charges made by the Department of Justice's Southern District of New York were contained in an indictment unsealed in Manhattan Federal Court. Federal prosecutors alleged that Bannon and 3 others orchestrated a scheme to defraud hundreds of thousands of donors. According to the indictment, promises were made that 100% of the donated money would be used for the project. But it alleged they faked invoices and sham vendor arrangements, among other ways, to hide what was really happening. The men are facing 1 count each of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. Each count has a maximum prison sentence of 20 years. So this news story broke today. Let me come to you first of all, Dave, on this one. I'm not sure if you heard this news today or whether this is news to you, but Steve Bannon obviously was one of Donald Trump's closest advisors, and to now find out that he is involved in a massive fraud under the guise of Donald Trump's wall, is it a surprise to you?
Absolutely not. We've known for a very long time, thanks to Cara Cadwallader, Peter Gagan, and these other, independent journalists who've been following Steve Bannon. They have known about his illegal workings in all sorts of other areas as well. To me, it's just a great big spider's web, and this is the first little bit that is being unpicked. And mark my words, it will come back to the Westminster government as well.
Okay.
And the Brexit vote.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Dave. Chris, what's your reaction to this news today?
Well, again, I'll augment what Dave had to say there about coming back to Westminster. And if anyone didn't catch it, they need to watch last Friday's edition of the Full Scottish with Kenny McBride interviewing Peter Gagan. It was an absolute coup de grace to get to speak to someone of such talent for investigative journalism.
Yeah.
Steve Bannon has also been linked with a certain Richard Cook of the Eastwood Conservative Party, and that linked into the dark money that was already linked into the DUP. So, as Dave said, this is a spider's web which is starting to hopefully unravel if justice is seen to be done. The question is, will justice be seen to be done? Will he just get a small fine and a slap on the wrist? Will there be further wider investigations in Britain, due to his involvement in the actual Brexit debacle?
Chris, can I ask you, just based on what you've just said there, you're saying that there's an alleged link between Steve Bannon and this alleged fraud and the money which appeared through Northern Ireland and on into, I think it was the Conservative HQ in Scotland before Brexit. Yep. Am I right? That there is a connection there? Yeah. I understood that correctly. If it were proved that some of the money which had been funneled through this particular channel into the Conservative Party's funds in Scotland, would that then implicate, do you think, the Conservative Party in Scotland in this web of intrigue, this fraud and money laundering that Mr. Bannon is alleged to have committed?
The Tories in Scotland are already implicated in the dark money process anyway, Gordon. It's widely known that Richard Cook, who is a resident, also a Tory party donor, he was a former candidate for the constituency of Eastwood as well. So he is well known, and it's been well documented about his money laundering.
Chris, just be careful what you say there about money laundering. We need to be careful what we say in the programme.
Okay, I was watching it at the time, right? But it was basically an Indian tyre company that he set up in order to funnel money from here, there, and everywhere. But eventually, it does go round in a dark circle. It ends up with the DUP, and it also ends up at Brexit.
Okay, and as I understand it, Chris, from having read up on quite a lot of the way this alleged dark money came through into Scotland prior to the Brexit vote, that it went via rather a varied geographical route through accounts all over the world, including I think Saudi Arabia was one of the ones that they mentioned.
Yeah. As I said, it took a very convoluted process, which involved some sort of tyre recycling company in India.
So a shell company.
Yeah. But again, I doubt there was any tyres that ever actually ended up there. It has been documented. We are not reporting groundbreaking news or making wild assertions or allegations. These are all well documented in the Scottish newspapers.
Yep.
And it is the first ring of the web that is about to unravel and hopefully fall at the feet of the Tories, because at the end of the day, people like Richard Cook and Steve Bannon, all the hedge fund managers and all the rest of it that have been making money for the Tories for years, in order for them to actually win elections and defraud the electorate, this is coming to home to roost, hopefully now.
Okay. Listen, thank you for that, Chris. I've just noticed on my screen at the moment that there is a question, which I assume is for me, about what safety measures have to be taken for driving instructors who actually are going back to work on the 24th of August. And of course, the safety advice we get from the Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency is quite detailed, but in general, we have to abide by not social distancing, but mask wearing, and we have to thoroughly sanitise the car before and after each pupil, including every single surface, handle and control that might be touched. So we have to go to great lengths in order to keep people safe, and I can assure you, as a driving instructor in my day job, I'll be doing exactly that. Anyway, I'd like to move on now to our next story this evening, and this is another story of, I would say, Mr. Putin's activities perhaps here. The Russian opposition activist Alexei Navalny is in a coma after a suspected poisoning. Russian opposition activist Alexei Navalny is in a coma on a ventilator in a hospital intensive care unit after a suspected poisoning. We assume that Alexei was poisoned with something mixed into his tea, his press secretary Kira Yarmish tweeted. Now, that was the only thing he drank this morning. The doctors say the toxin was absorbed more quickly because of the hot liquid, and right now Alexei is unconscious. An outspoken critic of the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, Navalny was returning to Moscow by plane from Tomsk in Siberia when he began to feel ill. The plane made an emergency landing in Omsk and he was taken to hospital. A mobile video shot on the plane showed medical personnel rushing on board as a man screamed in agony. Doctors are currently engaged in the process of saving his life, said Anatoly Kalinichenko, the deputy head of the hospital where the 44-year-old is being treated. Navalny was unconscious and on a ventilator. Kalinichenko told the journalists. He described the opposition leader's condition as stable, but declining to give further details. Even as he lay in a coma in hospital, there were signs of pressure on the opposition leader's family members and political allies. Navalny's civil wife and personal doctor had been barred from visiting him in hospital. Barred from visiting him in hospital by officials because Navalny, although unconscious, had not given them permission, Yarmish said. Hospital staff had also refused to show them the results of tests that would indicate a poisoning, she said. Meanwhile, investigators who said they wanted to check for medicines and other potential toxins had also seized his belongings, she said. Russian opposition leaders have been targeted with violence in the past. In 2015, the opposition leader and former Deputy Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov was shot 4 times and killed within sight of the Kremlin. 5 men from Chechnya were jailed for the attack, although his family believes those who ordered the killing were never caught. Now, this is a story which broke just earlier today. Dave, let me come to you first of all for your take on this. At the moment, it looks very much like the signature of a poisoning day. And of course, we saw this most recently in the Novichok attack in Salisbury. Why do you think, if it has been proved that there is a Russian actor that has poisoned this man, why do you think they are doing this? What's the point of such a poisoning?
Possibly the timing of what's happening in Belarus
Yeah.
The fact that perhaps Putin is a wee bit worried that it might trigger some kind of fight back in his own people in Russia. Just a thought.
You think so? Okay. Chris, if I could bring you in at this point, it seems to me, at least, you may disagree with me on this, but poisoning seems to be a trademark of the Russian secret services when they want to send a message to other dissenting voices. Do you think this is a warning shot?
Well, this is them bringing it into the 21st century. If we remember our history, if we look back at Leon Trotsky, he was found by an ice pick in his back. So, you know, it is indicative of how the administration is run in Russia. If you say anything against the state, if you make any public acclamation, which is in contradiction of the whoever's in charge, then you know it's a well-known fact. You know, at best you used to be able to get sent to Siberia. You know, at worst you used to get an ice pick, and now it's you know, poisoning in people's beverages, you know, sometimes even lethal injections. And you know, Putin is obviously scared of something coming out.
Yeah.
Because again, the journalist question is yet another valiant.
Here's the opposition leader, Chris, rather than a journalist. And as my understanding is that Navalny has certainly been, or there's been an attempted poisoning of him at least twice in the past, even once while he was in jail. So this looks like the Russians are trying for, you know, a third time lucky. Or unlucky, should I say?
I cited him as a journalist, and I do apologise. But what I was alluding to was the fact that he was, you know, he's obviously got information.
Yeah, he's been revealing corruption. Yeah, he's very much the anti-corruption man, or he was until now, and must have been a thorn in the flesh of Mr. Putin for ages, because he's always been trying to uncover the corruption at the heart of the Kremlin.
Yeah.
So as you say, perhaps he knew something.
He obviously did. He undoubtedly did know something, or he still obviously knows something. Whether this will deter him, you know, only time will tell. But again, you know, we see it in right-wing governments throughout the country that if anybody dares to speak up, they are quickly silenced. Obviously, Russia tend to use more subtle ways of doing it.
Yeah. Dave, if I could just come to you before we leave this subject. One of the things my grandmother used to say was poisoning was a woman's crime, but that was in the days when she used to watch Agatha Christie. But what I was wondering is, do you think that the use of poison is significant here? Because we heard in this report this evening that a man was heard screaming in agony when he was taken off the plane. Do you think there's some significance behind this using poison, which is obviously causing an enormous amount of pain, sends a powerful message?
Well, yes, and it is all about a powerful message. Lucretia Borgia, of course, was the great poisoner in the past, wasn't she?
Indeed, yeah.
So that's where women kind of get hard with the Lucretia Borgia brush. But I don't know that her poisons left people in terrible agony the way that Putin's poisons seem to do.
Yeah. Well, perhaps it's being used as a kind of terror weapon to deter anyone else from trying to uncover corruption. Anyway, I'd like to move on now and to not too far away from Russia. This time we are going to Belarus, and Lukashenko has launched a criminal case against a new opposition body. The Belarusian prosecutor's office has begun a criminal case against the newly launched opposition body, the Coordination Council, accusing it of an illegal attempt to seize power. a day after President Alexander Lukashenko threatened to sweep the streets of protesters who reject his re-election. The General Prosecutor's Office described the body as designed to seize power, and the act of setting it up as a threat to national security. No individuals have so far been named in the case. Belarus is facing the biggest political crisis since the breakup of the Soviet Union, with hundreds of thousands of citizens rejecting Lukashenko's claims of winning the August 9th election by 80% to 10%. For Svetlana Tikhanovskaya's opposition say the election was rigged. The Coordination Council was launched on Tuesday with the stated aim of negotiating a transfer of power. Its dozens of members include Nobel Prize-winning author and the ousted head of Minsky's main drama theatre, as well as exiled presidential candidate Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, whose followers say she won the election. The council said one of its members, Maxim Znak, has been summoned to appear in the investigative committee on Friday. It issued a statement saying its efforts were lawful. The accusation is completely baseless and without foundation. Our goal is to resolve the crisis without conflict. We're not calling for a seizure of power, said the council member. Sarihai Delyuski, the leader of a committee of striking workers at the Minsk tractor factory. Okay, let me come to you first, Chris, for this. Now, this is a very political move, is it not? The threatening to make illegal an organisation which is formed ostensibly, according to its organisers, to peacefully come to an arrangement with Lukashenko, presumably that he should go.
Yeah, but it's anything but peaceful, and that's on the part of Lukashenko. The people have made it quite plain that they wish for peaceful protest. They do not recognise the 80% majority that Lukashenko says that he has, and what we are seeing is what I alluded to last week on Broadcasting Scotland, is that a rising up of the workers in Belarus, similar to the Solidarność movement in Gdansk, and that is the only way to possibly legitimately affect change. We have seen throughout history that, you know, when workers unite and when workers have solidarity in the one common goal of actually protecting workers and their rights, undoubtedly they always win. Am
I right in saying, Chris, that it was a general strike that was called and it seemed to be solid, including apparently the workers in this, I think it was a tractor factory, but it also makes military vehicles.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. It's one of the biggest factories in Minsk, and it provides, I can't remember the exact amount, but it does provide a vast amount of steady employment, and it is obviously state-run. You know, and when the workers down tools, you know, which they have legitimate terms to do so, then, you know, through peaceful process, you know, they have every right to be out on the streets, and the heavy-handed tactics adopted so far from Lukashenko in mobilising the police in order to try and discourage any sort of protest against the result of the election is absolutely wholly unwarranted, and rightly it's been condemned by various governments throughout the world, and also again by the EU as well. But it's a real hot potato, because the EU don't want to be seen dabbling in another country's
No, they
politics that
can't.
are
Yeah.
out you. That would set up a row between Russia and then
Yeah.
things can kick off there, and so quite nicely actually the stories have segued one into the other when we were talking about Putin and now we're talking about Lukashenko. But all in all, at the end of the day, what we're talking about is right-wing despots who are controlling their country with an iron fist and don't want to relinquish it.
Okay, Chris, thanks very much. Dave, can I involve you in this conversation? One of the things that was mentioned in respect to Lukashenko last week was the fact that he was looking to Putin for help. Do you think there's any chance that the Russian leader is going to involve his own country's armed forces or police in anything that happens with Lukashenko's country, or do you think that's very unlikely?
I don't. I think he's going to take a very cautious view. He won't want to get too closely involved, just as the EU, I hope, shouldn't get too closely involved. We need to leave this country to sort itself out.
Yeah.
And decide what direction they want to go in.
Of course, geopolitically, Belarus is a buffer zone, if you like, between the Russian Federation and the European Union, a little bit like Ukraine was at one point. The Russians obviously feel worried that if there is some kind of revolution and Lukashenko is deposed, that they would be more worried about whoever comes in being more European, more pro-European. And it was why I was asking you whether you thought there was a chance that Putin might act in some way, in the same way that he moved to annex parts of Ukraine.
Well, what I've read and heard so far is that the people in Belarus they're not very, very pro-Russian, but they're not anti-Russian. And I don't think there's a huge call for them to join the EU. They're not that keen on joining the EU. So I think they're quite happy to remain as a buffer between the two. So in that case, Putin is probably wise not to interfere. But whether the EU is wise enough not to interfere, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying there is that the Belarusians feel that their independence as a nation is important to them.
Yes.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm going to move on to our next story. And again, we're going abroad again for this, but this time it involves foreign travel and the rules regarding it. Now, a significant rise in the number of COVID cases of COVID-19 in Austria, Croatia, Switzerland and Trinidad and Tobago means that travellers from these countries will have to self-isolate at home or another specified address for 14 days on arrival in Scotland from 4 a.m. this Saturday. At the same time, Portugal will be added to the list of destinations where travellers will be exempt from the requirement to quarantine. It's a short story that's very much a statement of a slight change in the Scottish Government's approach to incoming travellers. Chris, do you think that there has been a change of, what shall we say, a change of emphasis in the Scottish Government towards reducing the risk from countries which have seen spikes in coronavirus cases?
Well, yeah, I think that we can definitely glean that from the countries that have been added to the list, and as from Saturday morning. But whilst we are protecting our own country, unfortunately, it comes as no surprise to you, for me to say that again, it's our airports that are at the most risk from this. We have to weigh up the pros and cons. I'm sorry if I make enemies here.
I know. I know how strongly you feel, Chris, about the aviation industry. Of course, it's your members' livelihoods.
What we have to do is we have to find a balance at that moment in time. Now, again, I come back to the fact, and I fully laud the furlough scheme that Richie Sunak has come out. At the time that the scheme came out, I did say it was actually a bit of a socialist charter for a Tory to come out with. You know, but what is happening now is the fact that that is going to tail off.
Yep.
And these parties need to realise that you know that Heathrow can withstand this. Stansted will probably be able to withstand it as well. Maybe Luton.
Of course, these are the hub airports, aren't they, Chris?
Yeah. Gatwick might not. Gatwick might actually, end up a bit like Bestwick, but that's neither here nor there. But this is our main airport we're talking about. We're talking about Glasgow and Edinburgh. These are the two airports that we need to support and cradle through this economic downturn.
Chris,
sorry, Gordon, but without the economic powers to do so, then we will never be able to do it, and we could possibly see either Glasgow or Edinburgh actually closing.
Chris, do you feel, I can see how strongly you feel about this, but what I was going to suggest to you is there, do you think, a chance that the Scottish Government might be able to find the funds to put in place some kind of contingency fund to protect the jobs of workers at Scotland's airports, at least as a temporary measure?
I honestly don't see it, Gordon.
Because it's it's obviously, it's taking a disproportionate hit compared to other areas of the economy.
Yeah, it almost certainly is. But by the same token, so is the hotel trade, so is the tourism trade, so is the restaurant trade, so is the bar trade, all the rest of it, and all these trades interlink along with travel. You can't have travel without tourism. You can't have tourism without travel. And they have to be supported by the food and beverage industry. They have to be supported by retail, all the rest of it. It's an absolute minefield, Gordon. But what I resolutely believe is the fact that the opposition parties in Scotland have to join the SNP and argue for the fiscal autonomy, so that Scotland can actually borrow the amount of money that we need in order to support this industry, because if it goes on its knees, it'll be very, very hard to bring back up.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. We're going to move on now to our next story. The European Union has rejected a British plan for post-Brexit return of asylum seekers. European Union negotiators have rejected a British request for a migration pact that would allow the government to return asylum seekers to other European countries. When the Brexit transition period expires on the 31st of September, the government will lose the right to transfer refugees and migrants to the EU country from which they arrived, a cornerstone of European asylum system known as the Dublin Regulation. The government is seeking to replicate the European system outside of the bloc, although the Home Office has complained that the EU rules are rigid, inflexible and abused by migrants and activist lawyers. The EU member states have ruled out a British plan to recreate the Dublin system outside of the EU. Talks on a post-Brexit deal continue this week amid rising tensions between the United Kingdom and France following the death of a Sudanese teenager whilst attempting to cross the Channel in an inflatable dinghy. The British plan presented to Brussels would allow the UK to return all third-party nationals and stateless persons who enter its territory without the right paperwork to the EU country where they travelled through to reach British shores. The British government would have a reciprocal obligation to take in undocumented migrants arriving in the EU via the UK, excluding airport arrivals. Now, I think that's highly unlikely. Dave, let me come to you first on this story. How much credence can you place in this? The British government is trying desperately to do a deal whereby they can offload any foreigners who have come to their soil as asylum seekers, essentially. Was there any chance the European Union was ever going to do this?
No, absolutely not. And what a frightfully British thing to try and do.
Yeah. Do you think that the European Union would even consider a compromise with the United Kingdom on this, bearing in mind this seems to be very much a one-way traffic system, doesn't it, with most of the migrants being returned by the UK rather than the EU?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I just get the feeling that the EU have tried their best over the last 4 years, and they've now said, right, enough. We're not going to give in to anything else. They've compromised so much.
Yeah, well, the European Union have said that they were very flexible and prepared to make all sorts of compromises. Obviously, this was one that was too far. Chris, let me bring you in at this point. I know that you have an interest in asylum seekers and refugees struggling to get into the United Kingdom. How do you see this? Is this just another cynical ploy by the United Kingdom to try basically to try and get rid of people they see as undesirable?
Well, that is exactly it, Gordon, in a nutshell. And I can take this opportunity to point out that not all refugees in France or Belgium are actually asylum seekers, because people only become asylum seekers once they actually gain access to a human rights lawyer. And
Yeah.
they are very, very on the ground in France and Belgium. So, let's stop that right-wing rhetoric right away, and basically call them for what they are. They are refugees, and the reason that they are refugees is because the several governments have colluded to bomb the Donald Duck out of their own country. And, if somebody was bombing the Donald Duck out of Scotland, I'm pretty sure you would try and get to Ireland in order to get away from it. That's a complete side issue. And to get back to what you were saying, this is actually more to do with avoiding scrutiny on COVID-19 than what it is to do with refugees. The refugees have not gone away all throughout 2014, 2015, 16, 17 and 18. They have always been there. The British government have just chosen to close their eyes and their ears and let the French government and the EU try and work it out. And as you quite rightly pointed out, the EU have tried to do as much as they humanly possibly can. But when there's one side of the group who are basically holding their hands up and saying, no, no more, we don't want it, we're leaving the European Union, therefore we don't want your refugees. That's the end of it. And that's what they're trying to do. That is the whole cost of Priti Patel.
So basically, Chris, so basically what you're saying is that this is the Tories that saying this is Brexit, this is us slamming the door, we won't take any more people who've come from France across the Channel.
Correct. And that's despite the fact that people have still got legitimate claims if they have family who are traceable in Britain. The point of the fact is the fact that on the British side, the tracing isn't very forthcoming. And I know this firsthand from the partners that I work with in Calais, Claire Mosley, who runs Care for Calais. The actual office administration is absolutely woefully inadequate. And, any poor refugee who is okay enough to be in the situation of being an asylum seeker, long before they get their £37.95, the actual office administration between, what happens legally is absolutely woeful and inept, and it is not fit for purpose.
Right, Chris, thank you very much. I think you made your point very well there. I'd like to move on now to things that are happening in the UK now, and the Trade Minister, Liz Truss, has been accused of cover-up over a right-wing think tank and its meetings. Liz Truss is facing demands for answers over why her meetings with a right-wing Brexit think tank, which were removed from the public record. Truss's Department for International Trade reclassified 2 meetings and 1 dinner with the Institute for Economic Affairs, the IEA, because it said that she had attended in a personal capacity and therefore they did not need to be declared in transparency data published by the government. Labour's trade policy spokesperson Emily Thornberry wrote to Truss seeking answers about whether she had broken the code of conduct which covers ministerial behaviour. On Wednesday, the Department for International Trade said the meetings were initially included due to an administrative error and held no information about them. It declined to comment when asked how a meeting on trade and investment could be considered a personal meeting. The Ministerial Code says that meetings on official business should be arranged through the Minister's office and an official should be present. Any discussion of official business in another setting should be reported back to the Department. Right, now this is an interesting story. A Tory politician who has had what she claims is personal visits to a right-wing think tank struck off the official record for some reason, despite the fact that it's alleged that she was talking about trade at these meetings. What do you make of it?
Well, it's as part of the course. It's the way that stories work. Mm-hmm. And that the lobbying is so corrupt. You've only got to look at the way Dominic Cummings is handing out contracts to people without people that he knows and friends of his, without them having to go through the public procurement procedure to know that that's not that far distant from what this person is doing. Because there's supposed to be a record set of people who are lobbying you. So if she can just, well, it wasn't really an official lobbying.
Well, Priti Patel, several months back, well, it was about a year ago now, at least I think, was allegedly on a holiday in Israel, and yet was allegedly involved in dealings with the Israeli government off the record. Again, something which wasn't declared at the time. Do you think Liz Truss has something to hide here? What on earth could she have been up to? I know we're speculating here, but does Liz Truss, do you think, have some reason to be going to such a meeting, a right-wing Brexit meeting, and for some reason having that taken off the record?
Of course she will have a reason. And what you have to remember is Liz Truss does not appear to be one of the brightest candidates in the picture that makes up the Conservative Party at the moment. So she's being directed by somebody, and I can have a pretty good guess as to who it is that's directing her.
So you think she's been basically told to take this off the record to draw attention away from it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's a little place just not far from 10 Downing Street called 10 Preston Street, I think it is, where you have a whole lot of actors in there who are manipulating the likes of Cummings and Boris. I think that Boris Johnson is a powerful Prime Minister. He's not really. He's just a front for the Tufton Street people, Matthew Elliott and his wife and all the rest of them. And this Steve Bannon thing will be making their knees knock a little, I think.
So it sounds like the Conservative government's in a lot of trouble at the moment, especially also with independence sentiment rising at the same time. Now I'm going to, Chris, just forgive me if I move on to the next story. I'll give you a chance to contribute in a moment. The next story is concerning the Scottish Greens, and they have called for investment in bus manufacturing, responding to reports that Alexander Dennis plans to cut 650 jobs, including at least 160 in Falkirk. The Scottish Greens transport spokesperson John Finney, MSP, said the proposed job losses at Alexander Dennis would be devastating to the local community and to Scotland's manufacturing base if they go ahead. We know that free bus travel for young people delivered by the Scottish Greens in the budget negotiations will increase bus usage when it comes into force next year. Investment in building cleaner buses is vital if we are to encourage more people to leave the car behind and use public transport. I urge both the UK and the Scottish governments to look at the long-term benefit of investing in manufacturing, which will play a vital role in the building of a fairer, greener Scotland, and to do all they can to save these jobs. Chris, I know in your capacity as a trade union representative, this story must be of great interest to you. What's your feeling about what's happening at Alexander Dennis at the moment?
It's a fascinating story, and I'm just going to be really cheeky and just skip back to what David was there just for a wee second, and just add to the fact that it's been found out that there is a new firm that is linked to Govan Cummings, who they hired two friends of theirs to work with Ofqual on the A levels, and lo and behold, they got a massive subsidy from the Tory government in order to set that company up. But anyway, back to Scotland.
Okay.
I actually think that I'm getting more greener as I get older.
I think we all are,
The
Chris.
Sorry?
I think we all are getting greener as we get older.
Well, yeah, but the Greens are actually thinking well ahead.
Yes.
And I think I had a conversation with Kenny a couple of months ago when we were talking about the use of hydrogen in buses.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful time to actually start that just transition from using, the likes of heavy diesel and stuff
Indeed.
like that. We have got time on our side now to actually do the legwork in order to find out the viability of using more greener transport. And where else but a wonderful place like Alexander Dennis in order to actually, put the footprints down for other people to follow, because they have got they have got the staff, they've got the warehouses, they've got the depots in order to do it. And Scotland as innovators have got the knowledge in order to do it. So whilst we're in this sort of like alleyway of COVID, where production is very, very low at this moment in time,
So
we could actually this actually gives us a wonderful chance in order to actually go ahead with this and see what the viability is.
okay, listen, Chris, I've got to stop you there. So basically, Chris, you're saying basically now that things are bad, now is the time to invest in the research and development for the future of bus travel. Dave, if I could come to you, I know that you have a very broad green streak, certainly being a person of the countryside. How do you feel about this? Do you think that there should be investment in this company now, not just to save the jobs, but perhaps even to start, as Chris says, to pump prime the research and development for the basis of a new industry in green buses? Is this the time to do it?
100% about everything that Chris says. It's the most wonderful company, Alexander Dennis. It's an old company that has survived the ups and downs of rickety economies, and it's in the Central Belt, so it can make a huge difference. So yes, I back it 100%. And if our Scottish government doesn't back them and go with the advice of the Greens, I will be very, very angry.
Dave, I was going to say, was one other thing that occurred to me while you were speaking there, and that is that the Scottish Government has begun, has instituted a new investment bank in Scotland. I'm not sure about the status of that at the moment, but this surely is a job for an investment bank to look at that company and say, there's a future in this industry, and perhaps the Scottish Government and this new investment bank might want to have a look at this.
Yes, absolutely. I can remember over 10 years ago, we kept shouting to Richard Lochhead that we needed a rural bank, a rural investment bank.
Yeah.
Now, whether this has grown out of that idea or not, I don't know, but it's taken a heck of a long time to come to fruition.
Yeah, and I mean, it's six.
It comes back to the fact that we don't have the kind of autonomy and the borrowing powers that we need. You've only got to look at the lack of infrastructure there is in Scotland. And when the blooming Tories fought against the border railway, for goodness sake, everybody knows that a railway can set your economy on fire and keep it going.
Yeah.
And yet, the Tories are supposed to be the party of business.
Yeah.
And they did everything they could to prevent the Borders Railway getting finished.
And you think they're basically sitting on their hands with regards to these job losses as well?
Oh, yes.
Okay, listen, I'm going to move to our final story this evening, which is hopefully a good news story for a change, and that is action to tackle child poverty. Low-income families with a child under 6 will be able to apply for £10 per child per week to assist with living costs from November, with payments to start from the end of February. The Community's Secretary, Aileen Campbell, announced the update as part of a statement to Parliament on the Child Poverty Second-Year Progress Report. She also confirmed that a further £2.35 million will be made available to the Parental Employability Support Fund this financial year to boost the £5 million already allocated. £1 million of this additional funding will be targeted at supporting disabled parents to progress towards employment and to compete for jobs. Again, Chris, as a man of the workforce, I think this subject must interest you. Surely this is a terrific idea.
It's, again, it just, highlights the fact that the Scottish Government are able to get on with the day job and actually look after their citizens within Scotland. That has to be welcomed. As you say, it will free up people who are actively looking for employment once we get back to something of near normal capacity, and again, it's yet another step in the right direction. We see the Scottish Government trying to reopen the nurseries and the schools, and that's all driven towards allowing people to get back to work and allowing the kickstart to the economy that obviously the economy needs. And this is further evidence of the fact that the Scottish Government are going just that one step further in order to make it easier for people to transition into employment by offering this type of package. Okay. So again, we can see that the SNP in government in Scotland are the one progressive party that actually look after the needs of Scottish citizens.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks very much. Jay, just a final comment from you. A good news story. Parents obviously in need of money at the moment. Jobs are hard to come by, and any help surely must be a good thing.
Absolutely, yes. And Aileen Campbell is a great, is she a cabinet secretary?
She is. Yes. She is the community secretary.
Yes, community secretary. She's in the cabinet, and since she took over, she's been a really very calm little firebrand in a way, because she's got things done without making too much fuss about it.
Well, perhaps that's something that's needed in government, is somebody to kick backsides, get things done. Yeah. Well, anyway, listen, we're just about out of time. I know we overran a little bit because we started late. There is one thing actually that I wanted to say. All the way through the broadcast this evening, I've been seeing a tweet where somebody said they wished there was a television channel like this in Wales. Chris, what do you think? Is it possible there could be a broadcasting Wales? Should there be one?
I am so happy that you've pointed that tweet out because that's actually a comrade of mine, Glenn Swigler, who is a councillor in North Wales, where I used to live, and I would dearly love this to be replicated down in Wales for our Welsh comrades in Plaid Cymru, who want to see their country free from the tyranny of Westminster. Glenn put out a post today, and I put it on Twitter. Just to show our solidarity with Wales, because the pernicious attack that the Westminster government are putting on Scotland and Wales in order to centralise all power to within the confines of the M25 actually highlights what Dave was saying about the Border Railway. That they don't give stuffs about the Border Railway. They only give two stuffs about HS2. Yep. And the point that Glenn was pointing out was the fact that Wales are having to cough up and pay for HS2, and HS2 is going nowhere near anywhere in Wales.
Yeah.
And it's not going to benefit the Welsh people. And Welsh Labour, like Scottish Labour, are complicit in allowing Boris Johnson to do what he wants to do. So the sooner that the Welsh people wake up and smell the coffee, and and fight for their independence because they truly deserve it. I'm 100% with Glenn, by the way.
Okay, listen, thank you, Chris. One final comment today. I'll give you the honour of having the final word this evening. Should Wales have a kind of equivalent to Broadcasting Scotland?
One word, yes.
Well, my producer tells me that Broadcasting Scotland would be happy to give advice to anyone in Wales who wants to set up something similar to Broadcasting Scotland. Now that brings us to just about the end of the programme, and as is customary, it's time for me to ask you to help Broadcasting Scotland. So if you would like to become a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, you can do so by going to the website www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register and follow the prompts to become a supporter of Broadcasting Scotland. That's it from Thursday's edition of Scotland at 7. I'll be back again on Monday, but in the meantime, I'd like to thank my guests, Dave Tucker and Chris McCusker, and we will see you all next week. Thank you for watching. Hooray.